Hi guys. So another new build for you, and this time round it's an off-meta build. Me and Nedra have been, discussing things over the last couple of days, and we think we've come up with such a cool alternative that we had to put I had to kind of put a video together. And I said to him that I was going to obviously do this with the discussion that we've been having. It is off-meta, so there is some downsides to using it, as with any off-meta build, but it has got some nice changes that actually make it really fun to play. So as usual with our build videos, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the skills, we're going to go into the gear, the set items, legendary gems, paragons you can use, and anything else that we can go into which will show you how to make the build work the best for you. Now there is some different Paragon builds that you could use for this to make it work well, and I'll show you a different kind of few things you may change in the build depending on what you're doing, but for the most part you will be able to do anything with this when it comes to PvE. The only one maybe you want to change up a build will be for doing Gauntlet. I've tested this in raids, I've tested it in every aspect of PvE, and it works brilliantly, a lot of fun to play, including challenge dungeons, and it's a blast. So if you want to see more Necro content from me, don't forget, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it. So, skills-wise, we're going to be using Bone Spear or Soulfire. I prefer Bone Spear every time, but go with either one you want here, it doesn't really matter. We're going to be using Command Golem, Dark Curse, Corpse Lance, and a good old Grim Scythe. So, the next items we're going to go into is going to be the legendary gear, and I'm going to show you all this first, and I'll go into kind of what content you can do with this build and give you some demonstrations. So we're going to be using the Fateful Frame new helm. Now we know there's a lot of issues with this, and it was nerfed, and the changes we didn't really want happened, but it's still great for this build. So Grim Scythe also marks enemies for 6 seconds, and if the marked enemy is attacked 5 times, the mark explodes and deals damage. Your Grim Scythe's damage is increased by 90%, and then further having it awakened, I gain an extra 10% damage. Chest Piece, non-elude, and this one is going to be for your Dark Curse, so enemies affected by your Dark Curse are weakened, increasing your critical hit chance against them by a massive 19%. Now that's incredible. And the cooldown for Dark Curse is decreased by 10% because of the awakened item. This is how important the awakened items really are. Then we're going to be using this Ostralag. So this is another kind of fairly new item. And I'm not sure, I believe it come in this last set of legendaries. I can't remember with all the issues we've had with legendaries over the last, few weeks. I don't remember when this one came, but I believe it was, or it could have been the one before that. But Dark Curse marks its target for 6 seconds, causing them to explode on death, dealing damage to nearby enemies. The damage is increased by 90%, and Dark Curse cooldown again is decreased by 10%. Another great great decrease in the cooldown there. So the next item we're going to be going for is Fulsome Feeding, and this one is again for Dark Curse, and we've used this in many builds in the past. Dark Curse now creates an area that follows you, it damages nearby enemies, and continually generating corpses to feed obviously our other skills. Dark Curse damage is increased by 18%, and again, Dark Curse cooldown decreased by 10%. So we've got a 30% cooldown decrease on Dark Curse overall on our awakened items. It's great. Now for the first main hand, we're going to go with Rotted Harvest. This is going to be for Command Golem, so our Devouring Golem has an unlimited duration that consumes nearby corpses to increase its size, maximum life, damage, and attack range, while dealing damage and slowing nearby enemies, slowing being the important part in this build. We're then going to have our second main hand, which is Defiling Swarm for our Grim Scythe, to create them whirling scythes around us that damage enemies and create us lots of corpses, to feed our Golem, and to feed our next item, which is Lower Creed, which is for Corpse Lance no longer targets enemies, and instead now summons more lances from each corpse that seek out random enemies. And this is why I've called the build the War Machine. So you're going to be sending out loads of different lancers to loads of different enemies, as well as using your Dark Curse to curse an area, which actually causes mobs to blow up. So it's kind of that war machine effect, which is absolutely incredible because you get a shaking of your screen and you'll be able to see it all when it gets into motion. The next and the last item we're going to go for, just to help our golem out a little bit more, is corrosive slab. So this one here, we've used this in the past. Command Golem also makes nearby enemies vulnerable, causing them to take 15.2% increased damage, and the cooldown of Golem is decreased by 10% because of our awakened item. So, as you can see by that, like I just mentioned, we got this kind of shooting out loads of lancers. We've got some kind of screen shaking with our Dark Curse kind of blowing up mobs, and it's just absolutely insane to play. A lot of fun, a lot of numbers. Next items we're going to be getting to is set. Now, we've got the 2-piece Vifu's Urges. Obviously, we use this in all of our builds. You kind of need this. Increases duration of beneficial effects on you and party members by 30%. Most builds use this. I have tested it without, and you do need this. We then have 4-piece Augments, and obviously we use this in most of our builds now. The duration of your Ignite status is increased by 30%, and then the 4 pieces, there's a 15% chance of attaching an Ignite status to an enemy when dealing damage with primary stacks or skills, and it deals an amount of damage over 3 seconds. So this is great. So you're going to be applying it instead of with our other builds where we're going to be deleting it. We're leaving this on. We're going to be doing enough damage to the enemies that are around that this gets applied, and it does a nice ticking dot to be able to do plenty of damage to them and then blow them up with our Dark Curse. The other one we got here is the 2-piece Banquets for damage dealt to enemies suffering from continual damage and effects increased by 15%, just to give us that extra bit of damage going around. Now, one thing while we're on the gear before we move on, the main thing you're going to need in this build is this. The 2-piece Corpse Lance magic affix that you get from doing the Oblivion Pillars, the Hellslayer bounties, where you get this from here. You 100% need this. You will be able to use it without it, but you'll be extremely slow compared to how it is with it. We can get a maximum of around about 60% movement speed with this, so, you know, definitely farm out them too. Okay, next items we're going to be going into then is my legendary gems, and I said mine because this is what I am running. There may be some slightly different setups you could use. I'm not using my full setup. I do max out on my resonance now of about just under 3,700, so I'm around 1,000 under what I could max out at. But all that said, I'm using the level 10 Monskull, which is going to increase my damage up to kind of 36% maximum when it drains the right amount of enemies. I am then using Entropic Well, which is going to increase my skill damage and my skill attack speed and give me obviously an increase in magic find. I'm then using Pain Class to increase the damage dealt to enemies suffering from continual damage and effects by 24%, and also gives me a bit of movement speed. I'm then using Mother's Lament. When you deal damage, you have a 20% chance to gain this buff, which gives you an increase in your critical hit chance by 32% for 6 seconds. It can't occur more than once every 20 seconds. So that's another great gem to use. I am then using my Fervent Fang, which I am still leveling up, believe it or not. So I've only got it at rank 6 so far. I should have this ranked up a long time ago, but this doesn't work with summons, and I was mainly a summons player back then, so I am still working at this. So each time you deal damage to an enemy, that enemy now takes 1.7% increased damage from your attacks at this level, up to a maximum of 17% at 10 stacks. Also increases all damage you deal to elite and boss monsters by 3%. So that bit there is very handy. You can see the next rank is going to go up to 4.5, and hopefully I'll have this at rank 10 soon enough. I then go on to a couple of 5 stars that I've got here. So we've got Rolling Consequences. We all know what this does. Increases crit chance, gives a burn to the enemies. Great gem, best 5-star in the game, does plenty of damage. Then going to go into my Bloodsoaked Jade. It is at rank 6 with a 5 stars. Increases all damage you deal by up to 17% while at full life, and while at minimum life a bonus of 8.5%. Gives me movement speed as well, which is great, and I take decreased damage while below 50% life. I then got the last gem in here, the good old Berserker's Eye. Increases all damage you deal by 16% and gives you another critical hit chance by 2%. So with all that crit hit chance, my base is 20%, which is great. If you can get around this, you know, 15 to 20%, you're in a good range to be playing with this build. You want plenty of crit and plenty of gems that are going to give you that extra crit. Going on to one other thing before we come off this screen, I did put in here cursed properties wired. So after you kill an enemy, you get a surge of lightning that jumps 6 times between nearby enemies and deals 60% of the damage to them. Additionally, damage dealt to enemies that are hit by surge is increased by 18%, and obviously this has got a low cooldown at only 9 seconds, so this one was perfect for this type of build. How much difference it makes is yet to be said, but I think it's a good one to just put into the build so you've got that little bit of increase. So the big one that I've been really switching around when it comes to this build is the Paragon and what to kind of do with that. So Paragon wise, at the moment in time, I am sticking with Vanquisher. And we're going with Judgment, Exorcism, Wrath, Heart of Wrath, and then we've gone for Boundless Strides. You know, during a kill streak on this one, every 10 kills grants you 3% increased movement speed up to 15%. This was kind of a cool, I don't know how much it gives me an effect and how much it works, but I didn't really want to put it in anything else. I suppose if this was a null and void one, which it could be, you could go and put it into someone up here and kind of, you know, get increased globe drops. You could get increased gold. We need gold for enchanting nowadays. You know, increased experience. You could just put it into any of those. But these ones are the ones that really matter. You're going to have that crit guaranteed on after killing 5 monsters. You're going to get an increase in damage by 5%. This is then going to increase that even further. And obviously, this can now stack that up to 15 times. When it comes to the legendary Paragon skill, you just want to go with Lightning Rod. Outright for this build is probably the best one to go for. As we've said before, familiars wise, making sure you've got something that's got lingering wounds on your familiars is kind of a thing that you should be having now as a standard. It's great lingering wounds is, so where's my lingering wounds? So on this particular familiar, only 12.7%, but it's worth having for that extra damage. Now, when it comes to everything else and how this kind of build plays, I've mentioned everything to do with how the build works and what gear you need. Now you're probably wondering how the build kind of pans out. So what I'm going to do is probably one of the more difficult things that people ask about in PvE, and that is going in to do a kind of a Oblivion Pillar here. They can be quite difficult. Some people do find them relatively hard. And wanting a kind of a perfect build for them. So I think this is a good one for me to show you what it can do, and then you can obviously see how well the build works and how kind of well it would do in other kind of dungeons or in just anything in general, really, not just dungeons. Where'd it go? Here it is. Not just in dungeons, but in raids. I've done it in raids, and it wasn't top damage, but, you know, in most of the fights I did do top damage. There was a couple of occasions that I was below top damage. But in dungeons, I've been pretty much top damage all the way through with this build, and I've had a blast while doing it. Just something different. So let's get into this. So to start off with, you want to make sure you've got your golem up, because that is where your slow is going to come from. We're going to get our curse up, and we're literally just going to start firing off. And as you can see, we get a little bit of a screen shake when things go. Damage is kind of rocking around. There's no problem here at all when it comes to dealing damage here. Numbers are insane. Not a problem at all doing these Oblivion Pillars, even with the boss. Just make sure you keep yourself healed up with this build. You've not got really much of a defensive when it comes to this. And you just keep going, keep pressing everything on cooldown, spam out your lancers, and before you know it, you'll have all of these down and be onto the boss. And there we have it. Onto the boss. Who are we getting? Ah, not so bad. And there we have it. He is down. Wow, what a winner. We got 3. Any Legos? Oh, we got some shoulders. Not so bad. So that is how the build works. And you can see, yeah, there was a few issues there where I nearly kind of got hit a few times. But I wasn't kind of the point where I was going to die. I was fairly safe going forward. Now, when it comes to doing other things like overworld farming, and you want to kind of swap out your golem, you may be thinking, well, what can we swap out for to make it kind of the same, so you're still going to get the benefit of everything that's in the build? So what you can do, and what we found when kind of changing a few things around, is you can swap out kind of the golem here, and you could go into something to do with spirits. You can go with bone spirit damage increase here, the eel tongue. And then over here, you can then go with the Guard of Loom. And you can then use this other new item. But then what you also want to do is make sure you've got a way of slowing the enemies. So when it comes to slows, we don't have many. We do have things like the Abiding Curse gem that has got a slow to it. We do have things like Bloody Reach gem that has also got a slow to it. So you can use those. And by using this ability, instead of using Golem, you aren't gonna have to worry about controlling your Golem all the time. Because this ability just goes above your head and just shoots out. And that would still work just as well. You know, that's not a problem there at all. Now, whether that's better than using the Golem, I don't think it is. I think the Golem is still going to be trump above the rest, but it is an alternative that you can use, and I have used, and it does work. It's not going to be an issue using this at all. So, that is really the build in general. If you have any questions about the build and you want to kind of give your opinions, give your thoughts, give your ideas when it comes to changes in the build, go ahead. On the comments down below, do it there. In my Discord, which is in a link in the description, come on there, speak to me and Nedra. We're happy to answer any questions and test anything you want us to test out. But yeah, massive thanks to kind of the supporters of the channel. The channel is growing every day, and yeah, just looking forward to the future. I've got plenty of hopefully content coming this way for March and for just the Necro. Lots of ideas. Any ideas of videos that you want me to kind of add to my list, then do obviously put them in the comments as well. But other than that, guys, we'll see you in the next one.